All right, welcome back. Beginners Class 3. Today we're going to talk about bonsai soil, we're going to talk about bonsai pots, and we're going to talk about repotting. So a basic bonsai mix is a combination of drainage materials and organic materials. A lot of people use different variations. Everybody's got their own special mix, but the basic bottom line is that we're looking for something like organic material to hold some moisture and some really good coarse aggregate type material to make some good drainage for your trees. All right, let's talk about some soil components. Aggregate materials are rocks. At one time they were rocks and they've been broken down into smaller parts. Obviously the most obvious one is sand. Pumice is a great one. It's a volcanic product, and volcanic products in nature are also all different sorts of sizes, but a lot of places you can buy it already pre-sized for you, and it also needs to be washed of any fine dust before you use it. Pumice is a great one. Scoria is also a cousin to pumice. It's a black volcanic cinder. You can see this huge pile of it here up in a cinder cone in the mountains. And what's happening here is the guys are getting some and they're sifting it on the spot and taking it home for their bonsai. Some folks like to use perlite. Perlite is a product you'll see in almost any garden center. It's an interesting product in that comes as a rock to start with, and then it's got a very interesting property in that it's got bound up water in the molecule of the perlite. And when it's heated to about 1600 degrees, it pops like popcorn. And it creates all these little tiny bubbles which account for the amazing lightweight and the exceptional physical properties. Now a cousin to perlite is vermiculite. It's the same exact idea. The difference is it's a mica product, which is glass that you'll see out in the desert sometime, this silvery, sort of gold-looking, shimmering, glassy stuff. And they collect it, and it's also heat-treated, and it expands to many, many times its original size, and you end up with vermiculite. The one great thing about perlite and vermiculite, because it's been heated to such a high temperature, there's no fungus, there's no pathogens of any sort. So you know you're starting out with a nice, clean item for your mix. Akadama. Akadama is imported from Japan. It's dug out of the cryptomeria forest with sifters to separate the grain sizes. Some of it is fired, some of it is not. The ones that are fired are much, much harder. It's basically a clay. And the ones that are fired are basically organic free, and it has no remnants of any compost or anything in it, as most soils do. Akadama is a really great thing. It's a little bit expensive, but a lot of people swear by it. So other inorganics, there's lots of things out there. There's chicken grit, granite, crushed granite, decomposed granite, the calcined clay. There's various ones, turfus and the different ones. Lots of different things, and you should experiment with all those. So let's talk about organic soil components. I'm a big proponent of using what's available to you locally. Pine bark is a good one. A lot of folks use fir bark as well. These are forest products that have been basically an off product of the lumber business, the lumber cutting business. Other organics are peat moss, leaf mold, composted bark. All these things are really good products. Your mix will vary. You know, everybody's got their own components that are local to them, and you should come up with what works really, really well for you. There's a lot of possibilities. Use different ratios for the area that you live in. If you live in a real rainy area, you should obviously use more drainage type materials. If you live in the desert, you need more things that'll hold water. Some possibilities might be a third bark, a third pumice, a third sand. That's a mix I used for many, many years. Now I've gone more towards scoria and fir bark products, about half and half or maybe 60-40 scoria. But whatever you use, make sure you use your sifters and get the fines out. The little fines are the things that fall through the very smallest screen, and they can really clog up your pot. And over time, soil mixes break down and they get even finer. So if you start out with fines in your mix, within a year you're going to have a big muddy mess. Okay, what are qualities that are required in a good soil mix? Obviously, we talked about water retaining items, organic materials, humus, organic fertilizer. All these things hold enough water that the tree can take up nutrients and water into its system. The second thing is good drainage. Drainage is normally provided by the use of the grit, the small aggregate pieces that we talked about. So both of these two are always fighting each other. You got your drainage and you got water reholding capacities. So you have to walk that fine line of trying to get both of those things within your mix. All right, part 2. Okay, there are 2 broad types of bonsai pots. There are glazed and they're unglazed. These are overly simplified, but I think you get the idea. Glazed pots are a 2-step process. They're fired one time, they're bisqued, and then the glaze is added to them, and then they have a glaze surface. The glaze is impervious to water. It's basically a glass that has melted on the surface of the clay. We use glazed pots for flowering trees, for fruiting trees, and deciduous trees. Occasionally we can use them for smaller, like shohin type conifers. But for the most part, you want to stick with flowering, fruiting, and deciduous. You can also use them for accent pieces. Glazed pots work great. So unglazed pots. Unglazed pots are just the raw clay, and they're high fired, and we want to stay away from terracotta. We want to go with high fired. The difference is a high fired pot is vitrified. It's a word that means there's no pores in the pot for water to get through. They will hold water. What are unglazed pots appropriate for? Well, everything other than fruiting, flowering, and deciduous. Conifers, evergreen trees, and when in doubt, anytime you're in doubt about what kind of pot would be appropriate for your tree, a unglazed pot in an earthenware color, in an earth color, would be appropriate. We're looking for a harmony between pot color and tree. This is very important. Take a look at this interesting pot. It really, really matches the trunk color. It mimics the trunk color. Great contrast, lots of interest. It's been photoshopped. This pot has been brought in with Photoshop and placed under this tree, and this person is able to try on various pots and sizes and shapes and colors under their tree to decide what pot is appropriate. Also, the color of deciduous trees a lot of times look really, really nice with contrasts. So you have a contrasting color from the soil and then again the bark. The creamy yellow works really, really good with deciduous trees without their foliage. Okay, what about the color of pots for conifers? For strong trees, conifers, coniferous plants, trees with thick trunks, we try to use earth colors. We're talking about anything from dark red to the browns, light brown tan to dark brown, and also gray, dark gray colors. Subdued colors. Take a look at this one. This is all three. This is a conifer, a thick trunk, and very, very masculine as well. Perfectly suited in a dark brown rectangle earthenware color pot. Here's another one. Oops. Here's another one. Really, really awesome. And one more. This one is interesting because it's slightly feminine in the movement, but it's got a very, very powerful trunk as well. So it's very suited in the light brown pot. Alright, so let's talk about the color of pots for flowering and fruiting trees. We want to use subdued glazes at all times. Matte glazes, we want to match somehow what is going on with the tree to the pot. So here we got a really neat winterberry and a nice rose colored pot. Very suitable, very, very beautiful. This one's interesting. Early flowering ume, the white flowers, and it's got this drippy white glaze. So you can see during the year it won't seem completely appropriate, but I'm sure they had in mind that they were going to show this tree in its winter form when the very first blooms come out. So they matched it to the blooms. Very pretty. So what about the shape of pots? Style is our guide in this point. So we're going to use rectangles for formal upright trees for strong masculine trunks. We've already seen a couple. These are some of the shapes we're talking about. Take a look at this one. Talk about strong. Very much upright. Nice rectangular earth colored pot. Another version. Beautiful looking tree. Rectangle straight sided. Just the tiniest bit of a lip. Really looks perfect. So when do we use ovals? Ovals will be used for curved trunks and feminine trees. These are some oval pots. Even a pot that's got a clip corner would be considered an oval, more or less. Take a look at this. That tree is very, very feminine, very beautiful in its winter form. Oval pot is perfectly placed under it. Look at the color as well. Super nice. Another deciduous tree, rough bark maple. Very interesting sort of plum color glaze on this one, but subdued and very very understated. Really nicely done. One more, also a nice matte glaze under this trident maple. Matte blue with a little bit of a mottled texture. It's very nice. Okay, what about the shape of a pot for a forest? Well, ovals look especially good for forests. And you'll find that when you go shopping for a forest tray, you will find the ovals always much easier to find and much less expensive. It's very difficult for a potter to have a long, straight pot that's a long rectangle. The oval holds its shape much better, so they're much cheaper. Okay, now pots that we use for cascades trees. We'll always use a deep pot for a cascade. These are some different cascade pots. We need a heavy pot to counteract the weight of the tree coming over the side. Take a look at this one. Really nice. It's got a bit of calligraphy and painting on the side, and it's also a conifer, so the color is right as well. We want to continue to use deep pots for semi-cascade pot shapes. Lots and lots of variation, but all suitable for this semi-cascade. Here's one. Very strong tree, moves out to the right, and it needs a very strong and heavy pot to counteract all that weight. Very appropriate. Okay, part 3. Now we're going to move on to the potting of our tree. We're going to do the potting in 3 steps. First thing we will do is get our pot ready. Second thing we will do is comb out the roots and trim them. And the third part will be to place the tree in the pot.